What makes a child stab a mother pushing a pushchair? The police are hunting for a schoolboy aged between 14 and 16 after Christelle Stainfield Bruce was attacked on Friday afternoon after refusing to hand over her phone. Today, she and her husband spoke to our correspondent Simon Harris about the attack. They said they feel insanely lucky she is alive and that they have some empathy for the boy who did it.
Have a quick look, check how it is.
The dressing on Christelle Stainfield Bruce's thigh covers a stab wound which could easily have been so much worse.
They said, it could have hit an artery, which would have made me bleed out much faster, or it could have hit, a tendon, something that, I could have lost the use of my leg or my foot.
Mrs. Stainfield Bruce was pushing her 3-year-old son Henley in his stroller when a teenager asked her for directions.
So I gestured in the general direction that he was asking for. And he said, with my phone in my hand, and he said, "Give me your phone." And I said, "No." And then he reached around and stabbed me in the back of my left thigh. I was just so shocked, I knew straight away that that's what happened, but I didn't realise how bad it was.
The puncture wound needed 6 stitches.
We've been insanely lucky, and we've been touched by an angel, but this boy's been touched by an angel as well, because had it been worse, his life would have been over.
Mrs. Stainfield Bruce was stabbed in a residential street at Holloway in North London. It was late in the afternoon. For someone to stab a mum alone with her 3-year-old is shocking enough, but so too is the age of Mrs. Stainfield Bruce's attacker. Thought to be between 14 and 16, he's probably still at school.
I have some empathy for this boy, because nobody wakes up in the morning and decides that they're going to go and stab a mother with their child.
I feel like he's made me feel anxious in my own, my own environment, a borough that I know really well. I grew up in Islington, but also sad that why would somebody make such a horrible choice?
We don't know whether it was mental illness or gang-related or otherwise. We don't know, but he needs help.
Last night, somebody slashed the tyres on a car parked in the same street. People living here claim a sharp rise in violent crime has left them frightened. This woman asked us not to show her face.
Less than a month ago, we had a dead body found in a dustbin, again in broad daylight. And it's just been an escalating scene of crime, all related to drugs in the area.
And what do the police do?
Very little. They seem to have given up.
Do you see many police around here?
Never. I can't remember the last time I've seen a police officer in this area.
Tonight, the police said the boy who attacked Mrs. Stainfield Bruce is dangerous and needs to be caught. Simon Harris, ITV News, Holloway.
The job is different, but the slogan is the same. Back Boris. Boris is certainly back. When Boris Johnson became the Mayor of London, he was a Conservative leading a Labour city, a first. Now he says he's the only person to unite the country. At his campaign launch, he said Brexit can't be delayed and talked about how his experience in charge of the capital shows he's the right person for the top job. Many disagree on what sort of mayor he was and what sort of Prime Minister he might be. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
Boris Johnson broke cover today and launched his campaign to be Prime Minister with more than a few boasts about his time as London Mayor.
We cut the murder rate by 50%. We outbuilt Labour with more than 100,000 affordable homes, cut road traffic fatalities by 50%. You look at what we did in City Hall. We said we would do X. We ended up doing X plus 10.
But that's not how Brian Coleman remembers it. In 2008, Mr. Johnson made him chair of London's Fire Authority.
He was not up to the job of being mayor, but he managed to survive. And if there were any mistakes, they were just glossed over. And he had a good team around him.
Fortunately for Mr. Johnson, there were plenty of other London politicians ready to hitch a lift on the Boris bandwagon and sing his praises.
In all sorts of ways he delivered when he was Mayor of London, and I believe that he can do that as Prime Minister for the whole country.
You had people there who've worked with him for years in City Hall, who know what he can do in a position of authority, and they've given him a big green light.
Compared to what we've got today, you can see what a golden era it was when Boris was our mayor.
Boris Johnson certainly thought so.
I took this city through riots and strikes and all the teething problems of the Olympics, which was actually no picnic, as I remember.
Few would argue the mayor had a good Olympics. He was the public face of a city captivated by the magic of the moment. But hang on, when it comes to the riots of 2011, wasn't he forgetting something?
He wasn't here. He was on holiday with his family in Canada. He took several days to come back, despite the fact that the city was literally burning around us all. And there was a massive public outcry about why he wasn't there.
Boris Johnson's cheerleaders today included members of his family who voted Remain, brother Joe and dad Stanley. Do you worry the campaign could be derailed by continued questions about his character?
Not as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely not. I mean, I thought it shone through. I don't know what these continued questions might be, but whatever they are, they will, as it were, not make any impact.
11 years ago, Boris Johnson made his first assault on high office when he set his sights on City Hall. His slogan was simple. Simple enough for a reboot today.
What I want to do now, with your help, is to do for the whole country what we did in London.
No one knows what bumps lie ahead for Mr Johnson. There was the predictable encounter with anti-Brexit protesters today. But his team will be breathing a sigh of relief that the launch wasn't blighted by any self-inflicted gaffes.
Yeah, lots of commentators have said lots today about that speech. What was your take on it?
Well, two things struck me. First, Nina, I've lost count how many times you and I, when he was mayor, asked him to admit that he really wanted to be the Prime Minister. He never, ever gave us a straight answer. So this was a historic milestone. Here he was, publicly conceding that, yes, he does think he's got what it takes to go into number 10. The other thing that struck me was how he thinks his performance at City Hall really can be a template for the rest of his career. What he thinks he can do is convince Tory party members that because he defeated Labour in London against the odds, he can do it again in the country.
Look, he's one of 10 hopefuls. He's the front runner at the moment. Take us through the details of how the contest goes from here.
Well, the first vote by Conservative MPs is tomorrow. And to go through, candidates need at least 17 votes to get onto the next round. Then after a series of knockout rounds on June the 20th, next Thursday, the final shortlist of 2 candidates will be announced. Finally, at the end of July, party members will vote and the winner will become the next leader and, of course, the next Prime Minister.
Simon Harris, thank you.
Good evening. Police are tonight investigating the London comedian Jo Brand after an allegation she incited violence with a joke she made on the BBC. She suggested protesters should throw battery acid rather than milkshakes at politicians during a comedy show on Radio 4. And the Prime Minister said today the broadcaster should explain why it allowed the joke to be aired. Well, now the Met is looking into it too, but Jo Brand has said she isn't going to apologise, and the BBC says it won't be cutting ties with her. More from our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
It's very hard for me to talk about politics in this show because I'm a pathetic girlie.
She's the South London psychiatric nurse turned funny woman.
This really snotty bloke that worked there looked at me and he said, "I'm sorry, madam, you can't do that. You've got to go and get some chips first."
For more than 30 years, Jo Brand has been a fixture on the comedy circuit.
I've become a bit of a national disgrace.
Her jokes aren't to everyone's taste.
She just kept singing all the time. In the end, we had to put a pillow over her face. It was a nightmare.
But did she go too far on a radio show with a gag about politicians being attacked with milkshake?
Why bother with a milkshake when you could get some battery acid? That's just me, and it's all right. I'm not going to do it. It's purely a fantasy.
Nigel Farage, the Brexit Party leader, is a recent victim of milkshaking, and he didn't see the funny side to Miss Brand's joke. He tweeted, "This is incitement of violence and the police need to act."
I would just say to anybody, particularly if you are in the public eye, think about what you're saying, think about whether it's helpful, and maybe just press pause and think about that for a second, because, you know, I'm fairly confident that anybody who has been a victim of an acid attack or has a family member who has been attacked in such a horrible way would not find it funny.
But comedian Tom Walker, better known as the satirical TV reporter Jonathan Pye, thinks Jo Brand has nothing to apologise for.
I think anyone that seriously thinks Jo Brand wants people to go out and start throwing acid at people, they're either willfully ignoring context and intent, what a joke is, or they're stupid.
Do you think it's funny?
I did laugh, because she's a comedian.
The row over Jo Brand's joke reached Downing Street, where the Prime Minister's official spokesman demanded an explanation from the BBC. Miss Brand herself was saying very little as she left home in South London.
I'm not employed by the BBC, so how can they sack me? Thanks a lot. Nice to talk to you. Have a good day. You too.
Tonight, the BBC said Miss Brand's remarks on the radio show were not meant to be taken seriously.
Simon, why have police decided to investigate this now?
I'm sure that's a question a lot of Londoners will be asking, because it's not as if the police in the city don't have an awful lot on their plates as it is. But the truth is, of course, if somebody makes a complaint about an alleged offence, the police have a duty to take an interest, to look at it. And at the moment, they say they're assessing the allegation. No arrests have been made and, as they put it, inquiries are ongoing. Of course, the real test will be is whether the assessment then leads to an investigation. Will they look at it and say, actually, yes, it's obviously a joke and no harm was intended? Or will they say, actually, there is something here that we need to look into, and then start to interview people and presumably interview Miss Brand? We'll have to wait and see whether the police think this is really a serious allegation or something they have to look at as a formality.
All right, Simon, thank you.
Chuka Umunna became the MP for Streatham in 2010, once a rising star of Labour who made it all the way to the shadow cabinet. But in the last 5 months, he's left Labour, started a new political party and late last night announced he joined an older one, the Lib Dems. Labour members in Streatham told our political correspondent Simon Harris they feel betrayed.
Sir Vince Cable was showing off his latest trophy today, the party-loving Chuka Umunna. Party as in political, that is. The former Labour MP for Streatham has now joined the Lib Dems. It's his third party this year, which makes him something of a serial switcher.
I am absolutely against Brexit and was clear that I would do whatever it took to fight Brexit, and that includes, obviously, changing parties.
In February, he was one of 5 Labour MPs to walk out in protest at the party's refusal to back a second referendum. They formed a new party, Change UK.
The bottom line is this: politics is broken, it doesn't have to be this way, let's change it.
But last week, he quit that one too. Belle, Martin and Nick are Labour Party members in Streatham who helped get Mr Umunna elected. They feel betrayed.
I pounded the streets for Chuka over the course of 2 general elections in 2015 and 2017. So it really it leaves a bitter taste.
He has every single right to join whatever party he has. He's joined a few in the past couple of months, but that's not who was elected in this area. We elected a Labour MP.
I think he should have the decency now to call a by-election. I don't think he'd win it. I'm sure Labour would win it, and I'm sure that's probably why he won't do it.
But Mr Umunna has no intention of putting himself through a people's vote. Are you a politician of principle?
I'm a politician of principle, and I put that before party politics and tribal political concerns.
So why not put yourself up for a by-election?
Under our constitution, which should be changed, primarily you elect the individual.
Not to mention the strength of the Labour vote in Streatham. At the last general election, Mr Umunna had a majority of more than 26,000. As a Labour MP, Mr Umunna couldn't resist telling the world what he thought about the Lib Dems, which is why some of his tweets might come back to haunt him. Take this one. Vince Cable talks about increasing the minimum wage, but you can't trust a word the Lib Dems say.
I said that then. I was the Shadow Business Secretary. My job was to scrutinise what the government was doing. I don't resile from the criticism of the policies of the Liberal Democrats at that time.
Today, Mr Umunna says he's fully signed up to Lib Dem policies and he has no intention of trying out any other parties. Simon Harris, ITV News.